forecasters. This is just a very quick demo to show you how to use the new custom functions for retrieving weather data in Forecast Forge. I'm going to show you an example of getting the weather for January in Houston, Texas. So the first thing we need to do is get a list of weather stations, which is where the data is recorded in Houston. For that, we just say where we're interested in, and we also say what dates we're interested in. And then that goes and searches the database of weather stations. And here we go, we've got a list of up to 100 here, depending on how many there are and how close they are. So the first column is a unique station ID, so that's very important for when we actually come to retrieve the data. Then there's a station name. If you know the city of Houston, then these might mean something to you. Thirdly, we have the distance in kilometers from the center of the location we gave. So if, for example, we used a country or a much bigger area, then that would be a point in the middle of that country, which might mean that some of these aren't necessarily that close to it. Then we have a true or false column which says whether or not the weather station is inside whatever it was we used in our argument here. Now, Houston, Texas is clearly in a bit of a funny shape, and it's got sort of holes in it that are part of different administrative regions and weird sort of valleys and fjords, if you like, in its boundaries. So we have ones that are actually very close to the center that are not inside it, and then we have ones that are further away from the center that are inside. But this is useful if you want to see whether something's inside a city or if it's just close. Then we have the latitude and longitude, in case you need to look it up on a map or plot it on a map or something like that. We can see these are all pretty close together. Then we have the list of metrics that the weather station records. I don't know what all these abbreviations mean. PRCP is precipitation, SNWD is snow depth on the ground, snow is the amount of snow that's actually fallen, and then we have things like Tmax for maximum temperature and Tmin for the minimum temperature that day. And then we have the earliest data from this weather station that's in the database and the latest data that's from the database. And we can see here that for some of them they're missing the most recent data, probably because it hasn't been uploaded yet. And finally we have the overlap with the date range that we gave over here. What you'll sometimes find is, I've zoomed way past it there, what you'll sometimes find is that you might have a date range that's entirely between the earliest date and the latest date, but that you're still missing some days in the middle. And that's just because weather stations sometimes they don't record, or the data is faulty, or many reasons like that. So this column gives you an idea of how much missing data you might have when it comes to getting the actual weather data, which was a function called forge weather history. So firstly we give it a list of dates, then we give it a list of these weather stations, and the weather metrics are averaged across all these stations. Let's pick everything within 50 kilometers of the center, and then we need to say which metrics we're interested in, which here is the precipitation, the minimum temperature, and the maximum temperature. And then that will go do its thing from the database and retrieve the weather data into the sheet here. So we have the precipitation, we have the minimum temperature, and the maximum temperature. It's important to remember that weather data like this is often in weird units, like this is tenths of a millimeter and these are tenths of a degree. I don't speak Fahrenheit, but even if this was Fahrenheit, I think 143 would be very, very hot. From a forecast forge perspective, this doesn't matter, and you'll get the same results with these scalings of the temperature and the precipitation as you would if you used the more standard scales. But if you're trying to report on this to someone else, you will need to adjust these so it's more what they expect. Great, so hopefully that shows you how simple it can be to start getting weather data into Google Sheets, and then once you have it in Google Sheets, you can start to use it to improve your forecasts.